something about Archie's birth never matched the royal rulebook, and the deeper people looked, the stranger the silence became. The moment Buckingham Palace placed that easel outside the gates in May 2019, royal watchers instantly noticed something missing. Not flowers, not signatures, a name, just one name, the doctor. For decades, royal births followed a pattern so strict it almost felt untouchable. Prince William's children? Named doctors. Prince Harry himself? Named doctors. Every major royal baby came wrapped in official witnesses, hospital confirmations, and carefully structured transparency. But suddenly, when Meghan Markle and Prince Harry welcomed Archie, that chain snapped without explanation. And the public did not just notice it, they froze on it. Because the missing doctor's name was not some random clerical error. It changed the entire atmosphere surrounding the birth overnight. People started asking why the Sussexes, who constantly spoke about their truth, were suddenly surrounded by sealed doors, edited records, delayed photographs, shifting timelines, and statements that never fully aligned with each other.
If you had the option, P. Diner, to interview Meghan Markle, what would be the 3 things that you would like to ask?
I would ask her, girl, did you give birth to those children? Did you really birth those children?
Yeah.
That's what I would ask her.
Show me the birth certificate, okay?
Yes, show us the birth certificate.
The deeper critics looked, the more unusual the story became. Buckingham Palace confirmed Archie's birth at 5:26 a.m. Portland Hospital. Waitlisted. Harry present. End of statement. 32 words. Cold. Minimal. Detached. Almost as if the institution wanted to escape the subject as quickly as possible. But then another strange detail exploded into public view. Archie's birth certificate itself was quietly amended less than a month later. Meghan's actual first names, Rachel Meghan, disappeared from the document and were replaced only with Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. Suddenly, the public record had changed. Quietly, officially. And when reporters asked questions, nobody gave a straight answer. The Sussex camp later implied the palace directed the change. The palace stayed silent. And that silence became gasoline on an already raging fire, because now people were no longer debating rumors. They were debating visible contradictions sitting inside government paperwork.
She gave birth to them, and she has quite deliberately caused doubt, and she has created mischief, knowing that it would damage the royal family, which would show a level of spite and malice that is truly not only sick but evil. All other royal babies in the line of succession have had their births signed off. Princess Eugenie, Princess Beatrice, Sarah York, Diana Wales, Catherine Wales, you name it. Everybody knows where the babies came from, at what time, with proof. The only 2 children that there is no proof for is Prince Archie Bunker and Princess Lily. You better hope that she's really entitled to what they claim she's entitled to.
That was the moment critics started connecting dots everywhere. 1, pregnancy. 3, storytellers. Meghan's emotional Oprah version, Harry's dramatic memoir version, Buckingham Palace's carefully sanitized institutional version. And none of them completely matched. Meghan described isolation, fear, emotional collapse, and tension around Archie before his birth. Harry later wrote scenes in Spare that sounded almost cinematic, bouncing on birthing balls, food runs, epidurals, fast exits back to Frogmore Cottage. Meanwhile, the palace treated the entire event like a classified military briefing. Tiny statements, no details, no personalities, no witnesses stepping publicly forward. And once those different versions sat beside each other, people began noticing how often the details shifted depending on who was speaking and when they were speaking. The more interviews surfaced, the more the timeline felt slippery. Then came the detail Tom Bower allegedly locked onto in 2026. Every modern royal birth before Archie had established expectations ahead of time. Hospitals announced media position. Doctor identities known publicly, but Archie's arrival blindsided everybody. For weeks, the public had been subtly guided toward expecting a home birth at Frogmore Cottage. Reporters positioned themselves around Windsor. Then suddenly, surprise, the birth had already happened privately at Portland Hospital. Past tense. Finished. No hospital photographers waiting outside. No famous royal baby stairway moment. No immediate reveal. Just silence, followed 2 days later by carefully staged Windsor Castle photographs under total Sussex control. That contrast became impossible to ignore. William and Catherine showed George, Charlotte, and Louis within hours of birth. Harry and Meghan waited, controlled the setting, controlled the cameras, controlled the timing, and critics started saying the pattern repeated everywhere in their public life. Demand privacy publicly, release information selectively, control every image emotionally and politically.
I think she is a person who's done huge damage to the royal family, has been deeply, deeply inaccurate on many issues, and is of absolutely no value either to the royal family or society. But she just sucks from it, she takes from it and exploits it and profits from it.
And I have spoken to doctors, nurses, many women who've given birth to children, and all of them say the same thing. Those photographs of Meghan and the way the baby bump performed are totally unexpected, and they're not aware of any baby, any pregnant woman who is genuinely pregnant having her bump perform the way Meghan's has performed.
It's preposterous pair sitting down, giving that interview, that awful interview to Oprah Winfrey, calling the royal family racists. False.
There's a conversation with you,
with Harry,
about how dark your baby is going to be?
Potentially, and what that would mean or look like.
I was doing an interview to offer them a platform to tell their story about why they left. And that was my number one intention, was just clarity on why did you leave? And so some of the things that were revealed in that interview came as a surprise to me. And those surprises are now referred to as bombshells.
Then the conversation exploded far beyond Archie, because suddenly people began re-examining Lilibet's birth too. And that opened an entirely new battlefield. When Harry and Meghan announced their daughter's name honored Queen Elizabeth privately, Lilibet, the story initially sounded emotional and healing. But within days, BBC reporting detonated the calm by claiming palace sources insisted the Queen had never truly approved the use of her deeply personal nickname. Suddenly, the royal war reignited publicly. The Sussexes insisted Harry spoke directly to the Queen beforehand. BBC stood by its reporting. Palace insiders allegedly whispered furious reactions behind closed doors. And once again, two completely opposite versions existed publicly at the same time, with no resolution ever arriving. The conflict only intensified when commentators, critics, bloggers, and royal analysts began ripping apart every detail surrounding both births. Questions multiplied everywhere. Why were protocols different? Why were records amended? Why did statements constantly evolve? Why did the Sussex response pattern always seem to focus on attacking critics personally rather than dismantling claims point by point? That question especially started haunting the conversation after Tom Bower's 2026 book Betrayal exploded onto bestseller lists, because according to critics, the Sussex office condemned Bower aggressively, but allegedly avoided publicly correcting his biggest factual assertions directly. No detailed dismantling, no timeline clarifications, no hard rebuttals, and in the court of public opinion, that silence became suspicious all over again. What really terrified palace observers was not one single inconsistency, it was the pattern, because every time people thought the Sussex drama had finally settled, another contradiction surfaced from somewhere completely different. One week it was a biography, another week it was court paperwork. Then suddenly an old interview clip would reappear online, and royal watchers would realize a timeline no longer matched previous claims. And the longer this continued, the more the entire Archie and Lilibet story transformed from a simple royal privacy dispute into something much bigger, a non-stop public battle over credibility itself. Critics started asking whether the Sussexes were managing a family narrative or manufacturing one piece by piece depending on the moment, the audience, and the emotional objective. That is exactly why Tom Bower's work caused such chaos in 2026, because he did not approach the situation emotionally. He approached it like an investigator studying repeated behavioral patterns, public statements versus official records, timelines versus memoir descriptions, interviews versus documented procedures. And suddenly, people noticed something uncomfortable. The biggest debates surrounding Harry and Meghan were no longer being driven by tabloids alone. They were being fueled by the Sussexes' own conflicting public accounts. One version here, another version later, different emotional framing every time. And once critics started laying all those contradictions side by side, the picture became messy fast. The Archie birth controversy especially kept spiraling because modern royal births are not treated like ordinary celebrity births. They are tied directly to constitutional tradition, succession legitimacy, public transparency, and institutional trust. For centuries, the monarchy understood one brutal reality: the public must never doubt who stands in the royal line. That is why witnesses palaces historically existed. That is why doctors signed announcements publicly. That is why hospital details were usually established clearly. And that is why Archie's unusual rollout triggered so much suspicion immediately. Not because one detail alone proved wrongdoing, but because the structure itself suddenly looked completely different from every modern example people were used to seeing. At the same time, Meghan's defenders argued the exact opposite interpretation. They claimed the Sussexes were simply trying to escape the suffocating media circus that traumatized Princess Diana decades earlier. They argued Harry deliberately broke royal tradition because he feared history repeating itself. And honestly, that explanation emotionally resonated with many people too. That is why this story became so explosive globally. Both sides could point to evidence supporting their emotional narrative. Critics saw secrecy and contradiction. Supporters saw trauma and self-protection. The same events created two completely different realities depending on who was interpreting them. But the Lilibet naming war may have damaged public trust even more than Archie's birth debate, because this time the contradiction centered directly around Queen Elizabeth herself, arguably the most respected figure in the entire royal family. When reports emerged claiming the Queen allegedly felt hurt over the use of Lilibet, the emotional impact exploded instantly. That nickname was deeply personal, intimate, family only. It belonged to a private world surrounding Prince Philip and the Queen's inner circle. So when BBC sources suggested permission had not truly been granted the way the Sussexes implied, the backlash became vicious overnight. Suddenly, people were not debating hospital timelines anymore. They were debating whether Harry and Meghan emotionally exploited the Queen's final years for branding and public sympathy. And then came the legal threats. The Sussex legal team reportedly challenged BBC reporting aggressively. But again, the situation never reached a crystal clear public resolution. BBC stood by its journalism. Sussex representatives stood by their account. Palace silence remained intact. So the contradiction survived permanently in public memory. Two incompatible versions sitting beside each other forever. And once that happened, every future Sussex statement started getting analyzed under a microscope. Every sentence, every date, every interview, every emotional anecdote. Trust had fractured badly by that point. Meanwhile, another problem quietly emerged behind the scenes. The monarchy itself looked increasingly weak every time these conflicts exploded publicly. King Charles appeared trapped between protecting the institution and avoiding direct war with his own son. Prince William reportedly grew colder and more distant as controversy after controversy erupted. Palace insiders allegedly feared that responding too aggressively would make Harry and Meghan look like victims again. But refusing to respond created another disaster. It allowed unanswered questions to grow uncontrollably online for years. The institution looked silent. The Sussexes looked persecuted. Critics looked obsessed. And the public became addicted to the chaos. The wildest part is that the story still does not feel finished. More royal books are reportedly coming. More legal battles are unfolding. More palace leaks continue appearing. And every time another archive document surfaces, social media immediately reopens the same explosive debates all over again. Was the secrecy justified? Were the inconsistencies innocent? Was the palace manipulating narratives too? Did both sides weaponize the media against each other behind closed doors? The public still cannot agree because the evidence itself feels emotionally fragmented depending on which source people trust most. And maybe that is the real scandal underneath everything. Not one missing doctor's name. Not one edited birth certificate. Not one disputed interview. The real scandal is that the relationship between the monarchy, Harry, Meghan, and the public has become so poisoned that nobody fully believes anybody anymore. Every statement now arrives carrying suspicion before people even finish reading it. Every silence feels calculated. Every contradiction feels intentional. And until someone finally produces one complete timeline that aligns perfectly across interviews, records, memoirs, and palace reporting, this entire saga will probably continue haunting the royal family for years.